I wasn't supposed to know about the dirty Natalie Club. It was just one of those things people whispered about behind closed doors until I stumbled on the truth. Turns out my wife, Natalie, hadn't just been flirting with the guys in our unit. She'd been sleeping with them. All of them. And the kicker? They had a group chat where they bragged about it, shared details. Hell, they even had a name for it. That's when I decided to blow it all up. In one brutal briefing, I exposed them, Natalie, her lovers, every last one. And the sweetest revenge? It wasn't just the public humiliation. It was what I told her after about my own little secret with one of their wives. So, where do I even start with this? 40 years old, I'm in the military, have been for over 20 years now. It's a structured life to say the least. Early mornings, regimented routines, and a lot of yes or no sir kind of stuff. I've been stationed in different places, seen things I'd rather not talk about, but it's been my life for so long, I can't imagine doing anything else. Not easily, at least. And then there's her, my wife, Natalie. She's 36, and man, she's something else. Gorgeous. Like she could walk into a room and make the whole damn place go quiet. She's not just easy on the eyes, though. She's smart-driven. She's a secretary in the same military unit, which makes things complicated sometimes. We try to keep work and home life separate, but you know how it is when you're both in the same unit. People notice things, whispers here and there. I'm used to it, though. Comes with the territory. We've been married for 12 years. Got 2 kids, a boy and a girl. They're the center of my world. Anytime I think about doing something reckless, I think of them. It's the only thing that keeps me grounded most days. Being away from them during deployments is the hardest part. You miss the little things. First steps, school plays, birthdays. They're young enough that they still get excited when I come home, but I wonder how long that will last. Now, here's the thing about being in the military and having a wife in the same unit. It messes with you in ways you don't expect. When you're both in the same place, you're bound to see each other in more than one role. I see her at home, in her sweats, playing with the kids. Then, the next morning, she's in her office attire, hair pulled back, sitting behind a desk, handling classified documents like a pro. It's weird. The lines get blurry. We love each other, no question. But there's something about the pressure of the job, the long hours, the deployments, and the constant stress that chips away at things. The routine starts to feel like a grind after a while. You know? We don't fight a lot, but when we do, it's usually about something small that's been simmering for weeks. She tells me I'm emotionally distant sometimes, and maybe she's right. But it's hard to come home from the kind of things I've seen and just flip a switch. She gets that mostly, but it still creates tension. I guess you could say our relationship is like one of those storms you see coming from a mile away, but can't quite avoid. Most of the time, it's fine, stable even, but there's this undercurrent of stress that never really goes away. And lately, I don't know, things have been different. We've grown comfortable in our roles as parents, coworkers, and partners, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't sometimes feel like we're missing that spark we used to have. And there's the other thing, temptation. Working in close quarters with a lot of time spent together, there's always someone, right? You notice things about people. Maybe they laugh at your jokes a little too hard, or they brush up against you in the hallway, and suddenly you're thinking things you shouldn't be. I'd be a liar if I said I haven't noticed the attention Natalie gets. It's flattering, sure, but it also puts me on edge. I trust her, but that doesn't mean I'm blind. And to be honest, there's been times when I've been the one getting the looks. It's hard not to let your mind wander sometimes. The cracks started showing about a year ago, give or take. I'd been noticing little things for a while, stuff you don't really want to pay attention to because it's easier to just let it slide. But after a while, it's like this constant buzz in your ear that you can't ignore. The first time I really caught on was during a briefing. I was sitting a couple of rows back, nothing out of the ordinary, when I saw Natalie up at the front, leaning over a desk talking to one of the sergeants. Sergeant Daniels, I think. She was laughing at something he said, that easy, full-on laugh of hers. But then I noticed the way she lightly touched his arm when she was walking away. It was subtle, almost too subtle, but I've known her long enough to recognize when she's being friendly. I brushed it off at the time, thinking maybe it was just part of her job. She's a secretary. She deals with everyone, right? Then there was this other time in the hallway. I'd finished up a meeting and was heading back to my office when I saw her standing with a couple of the younger officers, Lieutenant Marks and a few others. They were all huddled together, and she was smack in the middle of it, smiling like she was holding court. Marks was standing a little too close, and I swear he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. I couldn't hear what they were saying, But the way they were all laughing, you'd think they were at a bar, not on base. Again, she had that flirty vibe going, laughing at every dumb joke they made, tossing her hair back, giving them that smile that used to be reserved for me. That one stung. I'd shake it off, tell myself I was being paranoid. But it kept happening, like the time I walked into the office to grab some files, and she was in the middle of chatting with Captain Reed. I don't know what they were talking about, but she was standing just a little too close, laughing that light, teasing laugh she has. I saw the way he looked at her, like he was eating it up, and then, as I was leaving, I caught her giving him this quick, playful wink. That wasn't work-related. I know the difference. I've tried talking to her about it, kind of easing into the conversation like, hey, you're getting pretty friendly with these guys. She always brushes it off, says she's just being professional, that she has to maintain good relationships with everyone in the unit because it's part of her job. And I get that. I do. But there's a line, and it feels like she's been stepping over it more and more. It's not just one thing. It's all these little moments that add up. The way she interacts with other men, it's too familiar, too comfortable. And maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just in my head. But it sure as hell doesn't feel that way when I see her laughing and touching another man's arm like it's the most natural thing in the world. The worst part? I can't even call her out on it without sounding insecure or possessive. She'll just throw it back at me, saying I'm paranoid or that I'm overreacting. And maybe I am, or maybe I'm seeing things I don't want to admit. Either way, the cracks are there, whether she wants to acknowledge them or not. Yeah, I try to handle it the right way at first. I'm not the type to fly off the handle without talking things through, especially not in a military setting where we're supposed to be professionals. So, after seeing those interactions with Natalie, I decided to have a few quiet words with the guys, Sergeant Daniels, Lieutenant Marks, and Captain Reed. With Daniels, I just casually brought it up one day after a training session. I didn't want to make it a big deal, so I asked him, hey, is everything cool with you and Natalie? You guys seem pretty friendly. He gave me one of those half smiles, a little too quick to deny anything. Oh, nah, man. We're just coworkers. I respect her, and you too. It's nothing. He sounded sincere enough, so I let it go, but something about the way he brushed it off still didn't sit right with me. Then Marks, that was a little trickier. He's young, still trying to prove himself, so I figured maybe he was just being too friendly without realizing how it looked. I caught him in the break room and said, look, I've seen you talking with Natalie a lot. I'm not saying you're crossing any lines, but maybe he's up a bit. He apologized right away, saying, sorry, man. I didn't mean anything by it. She's just really easy to talk to, you know? Didn't think it was an issue. He looked genuine, but I could tell from the way he avoided eye contact that he knew exactly what I was getting at. But Captain Reed, that's where things went south. I'd already had a couple of uneasy encounters with him before, so I went in knowing it might not be an easy conversation. I pulled him aside one day after work, and at first it was civil. I told him I wasn't comfortable with how close he seemed to be getting with Natalie, and I just wanted to make sure things were staying professional. He listened, nodded, and for a moment I thought it was going to be fine. But then he crossed a line. With this smug look on his face, he said, listen, Daryl, I respect you as an officer, but maybe Natalie deserves more than what you're giving her. It was like a switch flipped inside me. All the frustration, the doubts, the suspicions, it just boiled over. I stepped right up to him, and before I even realized what I was doing, I was in his face, practically daring him to say it again. My fists were clenched, and I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. What the hell did you just say? I asked, my voice low and sharp. Reed didn't back down, though. He just stood there, that same cocky look plastered on his face, and said, you heard me. Maybe she needs more than a guy who's always stuck in his own head, too busy with military life to notice what's going on at home. I don't know how I didn't swing at him right then and there. Every part of me wanted to knock that smug grin off his face. But I held back. Barely. If we hadn't been on base, things probably would have gotten physical. I stood there, fists clenched, teeth grinding, but I didn't take the bait. Instead, I just spat out, stay the hell away from my wife, and walked away before I did something I'd regret. That was the moment, though, the point of no return. After that, I couldn't stop thinking about what Reed had said. Maybe it was just him being an asshole, or maybe it was something deeper. Either way, things between me and Natalie haven't been the same since. Every time I look at her, I can't help but wonder if she feels the same way Reed does, that maybe I'm not enough for her anymore. I didn't go to the New Year's party. I had a military assignment that took me out of town, so I wasn't there to see what happened. But man, I wish I had been. The rumors started trickling in about a week after I got back. At first, it was just whispers, nothing I could really grab onto, but enough to put me on edge. One of the guys from my unit, a guy I trust, casually mentioned that he'd seen Natalie at the party looking a little too comfortable with Daniels, Marks, and a couple of other guys I didn't even know she talked to that much. I brushed it off at first. What was I supposed to do with that? It's not like she was sitting at home, waiting for me to come back. She had a right to go out, have a good time. But then I started hearing the same thing from different people. It was the way they said it, though. Everyone who mentioned it to me had that same look on their face. Like they didn't really want to be the one to say it, but they felt like I should know. That's what got to me. One night, we were all hanging out at the barracks, and one of the younger guys, Garcia, started joking about the party. He was a few drinks in, and you know how things go when the liquor starts flowing. People get loose with their words. He mentioned something about Natalie's little group and how she'd been the center of attention. I didn't bite at first, but the way the others reacted, laughing but trying to play it off, set me on edge. I asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" Garcia got quiet real quick, but it was too late. A few of the other guys exchanged glances, and I could feel the tension thickening in the room. Finally, one of the older guys, Jenkins, tried to smooth it over. Don't worry about it, Daryl. It's just party talk. You know how it goes. People get a little drunk, things get a little wild. Nothing serious. But I could tell there was more to it. I pressed Jenkins later, after the others had left. I needed to know what was going on. He hesitated, didn't want to say anything at first, but eventually he gave in. "Look, man," he started, his voice low. There were some people talking after the party, saying that Natalie was, really close with Daniels, Marks, and a couple of other guys. Closer than you'd probably be comfortable with. I felt my stomach drop. "What the hell do you mean by close?" Jenkins looked around, making sure no one else was listening. You know how these parties get. There's drinking music, people get a little handsy. They were hanging around her a lot, especially later in the night. Some people are saying they might have gone back to someone's quarters together. I just stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. The room felt like it was closing in on me. "Look, I'm not saying anything happened for sure," Jenkins added quickly. "But you know how rumors start. People see a group leave together, and they start talking. That was the thing, though. Rumors don't just come out of nowhere, especially not in a place like this. People saw something, and whether it was innocent or not, it didn't matter. It was enough to light a fire in my gut. I confronted Natalie about it when I got home, trying to stay calm, but barely holding it together. I told her what I'd heard about Daniels, Marks, and the others. She looked surprised at first, like she hadn't expected me to find out. But then she got defensive. "Are you seriously asking me about this? You know how people talk around here. I didn't do anything. We were just having fun." Her words didn't make me feel any better. Fun? What kind of fun are we talking about, Natalie? Because from what I'm hearing, it sounds like more than just a few drinks and some laughs. She shot me a look, crossing her arms. "You're being ridiculous. You weren't even there, Daryl. You don't know what happened." That stung. She wasn't wrong. I wasn't there. But that's what made it worse. The fact that I had to rely on rumors and secondhand stories because I wasn't around to see it for myself. And the way she was reacting, it didn't exactly ease my mind. We went back and forth for a while, her insisting nothing happened, me pushing for more details, trying to figure out what the hell had really gone down that night. In the end, she just stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there with a head full of doubts and no real answers. The day after I had that fight with Natalie, I got a message from Lieutenant Marks's wife, Sarah. I didn't know her all that well, but I knew her enough to think it was odd she'd be reaching out. She said she needed to talk to me about something important and asked if we could meet in person. The way she worded it, I could tell this wasn't just small talk. I had a gut feeling this was going to be bad, but I didn't know just how bad. We met at a coffee shop off base, somewhere quiet. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles under her eyes, her hands shaking a little as she sipped her coffee. I sat down, and before I could even say anything, she just blurted it out. "I found out Marks has been cheating on me," she said, her voice low and unsteady. "With your wife." For a second, I didn't know if I'd heard her right. I just stared at her, my mind racing, trying to wrap my head around what she'd just said. "With Natalie?" I managed to get out. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears she was clearly trying to hold back. I found messages on his phone, explicit ones. It wasn't just flirting. They'd been sleeping together. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The air got sucked out of the room, and my chest tightened. But what she said next, well, that's when the floor really dropped out from under me. It's not just him, Daryl, she said, her voice shaking. There's more. A lot more. I sat there in silence, bracing myself. There's a group chat, she continued, her words coming out in a rush now. It's called the Dirty Natalie Club. It's Marks and 5 or 6 other guys. They've been talking about her, about what they've done with her. The messages, they talk about her like she's some kind of conquest. I felt sick. She handed me her phone, showing me screenshots of the messages she'd taken from Marks's phone. I didn't even want to look, but I couldn't help myself. The things these guys were saying, it was like reading some disgusting locker room talk, only worse. They talked about Natalie in detail, explicit, crude details. Every rendezvous, every encounter was laid out like they were keeping score. And it wasn't just one-on-one. They talked about group stuff too. Group sex. It made my skin crawl. They've been meeting up behind our backs, Sarah said, her voice tight with anger and hurt. Your wife, my husband, and those other bastards. It's been going on for months, maybe longer. I just sat there, staring at the phone, my stomach in knots. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know how to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Numbness? It all hit me at once. This wasn't just an affair. This was something else entirely. And it wasn't just one guy. It was a group of them, all in on it, laughing behind our backs while they took turns with my wife. My mind flashed to all those times I'd caught little glimpses of Natalie with these guys. Daniels, Marks, Reed, and I realized this wasn't in my head. It had been happening right in front of me the whole time, and I'd ignored the signs. Sarah leaned in closer, her voice lowering even more. I'm not just telling you this to hurt you, Daryl. I'm telling you because I want to do something about it. I want revenge. Revenge. The word hung heavy between us. I wasn't even sure what that meant in this situation, but I could see in her eyes that she was serious. I have all the names, she said. I know who's involved. I've got the messages, the proof. Marks, Daniels, Reed, a few others. They've all been with her. And I'm not just going to sit back and let them get away with it. I didn't say anything for a long time. I was too busy trying to keep myself from losing it right there in the middle of the coffee shop. My mind was spinning. What the hell was I supposed to do with this? Go confront Natalie? Confront these guys? Burn my life down just to get even? Sarah could see the conflict on my face. You deserve better than this, she said, her voice softening for the first time since we sat down. We both do, but I'm not going to let them walk away from this like nothing happened. And neither should you. I didn't respond right away. I just nodded, barely able to process everything she'd just dumped on me. Part of me wanted to walk out of there, pretend like none of this was happening. But the other part of me, the part that felt humiliated, betrayed, furious, that part wanted blood. Sarah slid her phone back in her bag and stood up. Think about it, she said, her voice cold again. We don't have to take this lying down. We can make sure they pay for what they've done. Together. And with that, she left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. I'll be honest, revenge wasn't my style. Not until this. But after finding out what Natalie had been doing behind my back, and with how many people, it became clear that there was no coming back from this. I wasn't just going to sit there and let her, or any of those guys, get away with it like nothing happened. So I decided to go big. If I was going to burn my life down, I was going to take them all down with me. It was a few days after my meeting with Sarah when I finally made my move. There was a briefing scheduled, a full room of officers, sergeants, and a few higher-ups. I knew most of the guys involved would be there. Daniels, Marks, Reed, and the rest of the Dirty Natalie Club. Natalie, of course, would be there too, sitting at her desk up front like she didn't have a care in the world. I had spent the night before preparing everything. The screenshots, the messages, all of it. I was going to put their dirty little secret on display for everyone to see. When the briefing was wrapping up, I stood up and asked for a word. Nothing unusual. People knew me, trusted me. Nobody saw it coming. I started off light, throwing in a few jokes to keep the mood casual. So, hey, before we wrap things up, I've got a story I think you all might find interesting. Ever heard of the Dirty Natalie Club? There was an awkward chuckle from the room, probably just people thinking I was making some offhand joke. But I wasn't joking. Yeah, funny name, right? But here's the thing. It's real. Real enough that a few of you in this room are members. A little exclusive club where certain guys have been, shall we say, sharing my wife. The room went dead silent. You could practically hear the tension snap. I could see people glancing around, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank or if I'd really just said that. And then I dropped the bomb. I've got proof. You all want to see it? I walked over to the screen at the front of the room, plugged in the USB drive with all the screenshots I'd collected, and pulled up the group chat, the infamous Dirty Natalie Club. Messages from Daniels, Marks, Reed, and a couple of others. The filth they'd written about Natalie was right there, in black and white for everyone to see. There were gasps. I could see people's faces going pale as I scrolled through the screenshots. Some of the guys involved were shifting in their seats, trying to look like they hadn't just been exposed. A few of them, including Marks, looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. Natalie? She just sat there frozen. Her face went white as a sheet, and she didn't even try to defend herself. She knew the game was up. I think we can all agree this is more than just a little office gossip, right? I said, keeping my tone calm, but with enough bite to show I wasn't messing around. I think it's pretty clear who's involved. Daniels, Marks, Reed, you guys want to explain yourselves? No, didn't think so. The whole room was dead quiet. Nobody knew what to say. The senior officers, the ones who'd been sitting up front, looked pissed, and not just at me. They knew what this meant. It was the kind of scandal that gets people fired, and sure enough, they weren't going to let it slide. I stepped away from the screen, letting the reality of it all sink in for everyone. Well, I guess that's enough for today, huh? Enjoy your afternoon, fellas. Oh, and don't bother coming back tomorrow. Pretty sure your careers just ended. I walked out of the room after that, leaving the mess behind me. I heard later that Daniels, Marks, Reed, and the rest of them were fired, discharged dishonorably. Natalie, too. She didn't even get a chance to fight it. The truth was too big, too ugly. It was over for her. But the sweetest part of the revenge? That came later when I sat down with Natalie for the final time. She came to me, trying to talk, trying to explain herself. But I wasn't in the mood to listen. I told her everything. How I found out, how Sarah had shown me the messages, and how I'd taken down every last one of them in front of the whole unit. She just sat there, looking wrecked, like she didn't know what to say. But then I hit her with a final blow. You know, there's one more thing, I said, leaning back in my chair, arms crossed. While you were out there sleeping with half the base, I had my own little rendezvous. A few nights, actually, with Sarah, Marks' wife. Her face went from shock to angry real fast. And you know what? It was great, I said, smirking. She made sure I didn't feel like I was missing out. I watched as the realization sank in, the look of betrayal flashing across her face. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She didn't have anything to say. I'd taken everything from her. The lies, the affairs, the reputation, and turned it all around. And now, she had nothing left. I walked out after that, leaving her there to deal with the mess she created. As far as I was concerned, the chapter was closed. My life wasn't going to be the same after that, but I wasn't about to let her or any of those guys walk away without paying the price. They'd all made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. And for me, it might not have fixed everything, but damn if it didn't feel good to finally get the last word. After everything came crashing down, there wasn't much left to salvage, especially not my marriage. The divorce happened quickly, almost too quickly. It was like we both knew there was no point dragging it out, no point pretending there was anything left to fight for. Natalie didn't contest anything. How could she, after what had been revealed? She left quietly, and the only conversations we had after that were through lawyers. Our kids, well, that was the hardest part. We worked out custody, made it as smooth as possible for their sake, but it was a mess. They were too young to fully understand what had happened, but I know they felt the change. They still do. Once the dust settled, it was clear that staying around wasn't an option. The rumors, the whispers, the stares, it was suffocating. Everyone knew what had happened. Hell, I made sure of that. But even though I got my revenge, being in the same unit after blowing up my life like that was a no-go. So I requested a transfer, packed up, and moved to another state. Somewhere fresh. Somewhere I could start over without the weight of my past hanging around my neck. The military granted the transfer fairly quickly, considering the circumstances. I moved to a new base, new unit, new faces, where no one knew the story of Dirty Natalie Club or how I'd exposed everything. It felt like a clean slate. I threw myself back into work, climbing the ranks again, focusing on the job. Anything to keep my mind off everything I'd lost. For a while, I kept my distance from the whole idea of relationships. After what I'd been through, trust wasn't exactly easy to come by. I saw Natalie from a distance a couple of times when I came back to visit the kids, but we barely spoke. Co-parenting was tough, but I made sure my kids didn't get caught in the crossfire. They didn't need to know the full extent of what had happened. To them, their mom and I just didn't work out, and I was determined to keep it that way. As for the guys, Daniels, Marks, Reed, and the others, they were all gone, discharged and out of the military. I heard through the grapevine that Marks's life didn't recover after the scandal. His wife, Sarah, followed through with the divorce and took him for everything he had. Reed moved out of state too, but from what I know, his reputation was permanently stained. Same for Daniels and the rest. None of them would ever live that down, and they deserved every bit of it. And Sarah, well, I'd like to say that what happened between us meant something more, but it didn't. It was revenge, pure and simple, and once that moment had passed, so did whatever we had. We haven't spoken since. She got her closure, and I got mine. That was that. In the end, moving on wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I focused on rebuilding my life, and slowly, I started to piece things back together. A new job, new friendships, and eventually, even the idea of new relationships didn't seem so impossible anymore. But the lessons from what happened, those stuck with me. The way trust can be shattered, the way loyalty can be nothing more than a word if you're not careful. It all leaves scars. I'm not the same guy I was before all of this. How could I be? But here's the thing. I survived it. I came out the other side, scarred sure, but still standing. And maybe that's the takeaway. Life doesn't always go the way you plan, and sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. But you get through it. You move forward, piece by piece, until one day you look around and realize that despite everything, you've built something new, something better. So, I guess that's where my story ends. A little older, a little wiser, and a hell of a lot tougher. My military career is back on track, and I've found my footing again in this new place. As for love, who knows? I'm not looking for it, but I'm not running from it either. Whatever comes next, I'm ready. Because after going through hell, you learn that you can handle just about anything. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. New cheating wife stories tomorrow.